The email arrived at exactly 8:43 a.m. Maya was still in the elevator when her phone buzzed. She almost ignored it. Almost. But something about the timing made her stomach tighten. When the doors opened onto the 23rd floor, she didn't step out right away. The fluorescent lights flickered. The office hallway looked the same as it had every morning for the past 3 years. Cold. Sterile. Watching. Her thumb hovered over the notification. From Daniel Reeves. Subject, quick reminder. Her chest tightened. Of course it was him. It was always him. She didn't need to open it to know what it would say. She could already hear his voice in her head. Smooth, condescending, that fake laugh he used when he wanted to make someone feel small. Let's try to be more proactive, Maya. Not sure you're cut out for high-pressure environments. Some people just don't have leadership energy. 3 years. 3 years of swallowing humiliation in conference rooms. 3 years of watching him take credit for her ideas. 3 years of subtle insults delivered with a smile while everyone else nervously stared at the table. She stepped out of the elevator. Her heels clicked against the tile. Each step felt heavier than the last. Her desk sat near the windows, but the blinds were always half closed. Daniel said direct sunlight made the office look unprofessional. Maya used to love sunlight. Now she barely noticed it. She opened the email. Just a reminder that the Johnson account numbers were weak this quarter. We'll discuss your performance later. Come prepared. Weak. Her throat burned. She had stayed in the office until midnight 3 times that week fixing mistakes the sales team made. She had rewritten the entire strategy deck after Daniel rejected it, without even reading it. Weak. Her fingers trembled slightly as she set her phone down. Across the room, she could see him. Daniel Reeves. Perfectly tailored navy suit. Expensive watch. That smug half-smile he wore like armor. He was laughing with 2 senior managers. Maya knew that laugh. It was the laugh he used right before he humiliated someone publicly. Her stomach flipped, and then she felt it again. That same feeling she'd been having for weeks. Not fear. Not exactly. Something colder. Something sharper. Resolve. 30 days earlier, she had made a decision. It hadn't happened dramatically. There was no cinematic moment. Just a Tuesday afternoon. Conference room B. Daniel had interrupted her mid-presentation. Actually laughed. Actually said, "Wow, that's optimistic. Did anyone else prepare something more realistic?" The room went silent. Maya felt heat crawl up her neck. Her slides were solid, data-backed, carefully built. He hadn't even looked at them. Later that day, she overheard him in his office. Door slightly open. He was on the phone. "I keep her around because she works hard. But she's not leadership material. Honestly, she's replaceable." Replaceable. The word lodged in her chest like a stone. That was the moment. Not dramatic. Not loud. Just quiet devastation. And quiet decisions are the most dangerous ones. That night, she went home, sat on her bed, and stared at her phone for a long time. Then she did something she had never imagined herself doing. She turned on the voice memo app, and the next morning, when Daniel called her into his office, she hit record. Day 1. Her heart had pounded so hard she thought he could hear it. He didn't. He was too busy telling her she lacked confidence. Day 3. He told her she should smile more in meetings. Day 7. He blamed her for missing metrics that were clearly documented as someone else's responsibility. Day 12. He joked in front of the team that she was too emotional for high-level negotiations. Day 18. He implied she got her promotion because HR likes diversity optics. That one made her hands shake. Day 23. He berated her for a client loss that happened while she was on approved medical leave. Day 27. He slammed his hand on the desk and said, "If you can't handle pressure, maybe this isn't the place for you." Every single time. She recorded it. Every word. Every tone shift. Every laugh. 30 days. She didn't react. Didn't argue. Didn't defend herself. She became calm. Observant. Methodical. because while Daniel thought he was breaking her down, she was building something. Now back to the present. 8:57 a.m. Her calendar notification popped up. Performance review, 9 a.m. Daniel Reeves' office. Her pulse steadied. This was it. But Daniel didn't know that. He thought this was just another meeting where he would sit back, adjust his cufflinks, and remind her of her place. He had no idea that on her laptop, in a password-protected folder labeled Q4 reports, there were 30 separate audio files. He had no idea she had transcribed every single one. He had no idea she had dates, times, witnesses. He had no idea that she had already drafted an email addressed not to him, but to human resources, and CC'd it to the regional director, and attached to that email 30 files, 30 days, 30 chances he gave her. She stood up, smoothed her blazer. Across the room, Daniel looked up and caught her eye. He gave her that same patronizing smile, the one that said, "You're about to be reminded who's in charge." Maya smiled back. For the first time in 3 years, it wasn't forced. It wasn't nervous. It was calm. And that unsettled him. She walked toward his office, each step steady, each breath controlled, because sometimes revenge isn't loud, sometimes it's patient, and sometimes it waits exactly 30 days. To strike on the 31st, Daniel didn't look up when she walked in. That was his first move. Always. Make them stand there. Make them wait. Power was in the silence. Maya closed the door behind her softly. The click echoed louder than it should have. He shuffled papers on his desk, pretending to review something important. The blinds behind him were half closed, slicing the morning light into thin bars across the room. It felt like an interrogation chamber. "Sit," he said casually, still not looking at her. She sat today, back straight, hands folded loosely in her lap. No trembling this time. Daniel finally glanced up, and for just a second, something flickered across his face. Confusion. She wasn't shrinking. She wasn't bracing. She wasn't trying to anticipate his mood. She was calm. He leaned back in his leather chair. "So," he sighed, dragging the word out, "let's talk about your performance." There it was. The tone. Soft. Controlled. Designed to sound reasonable. Designed to make her question herself. He slid a paper across the desk. A printed performance summary. Red circles. Highlighted metrics. Notes in the margin. Maya didn't look down. "I'm concerned," he continued. "Your leadership presence is lacking. Clients don't respond to uncertainty." Uncertainty. Her heartbeat slowed. She knew this script. He leaned forward now. "Elena mentioned you seemed hesitant during the Johnson call." Elena, the same Elena who had emailed Maya after that call saying, "You handled that perfectly." But Daniel never CC'd those emails into reviews. Only criticisms survived. "You need thicker skin," he said. "This isn't a classroom." He paused, waiting for her reaction. In the past, this is where she would have tried to defend herself. Explained. Over-explained. Apologized for things that weren't hers to carry. Not today. He frowned slightly. The silence stretched. He shifted in his chair. "You're very quiet." Maya tilted her head slightly. "I'm listening." That unsettled him more than anger would have. Daniel cleared his throat. "Well, good. Because I'm trying to help you." "Help." Her jaw tightened internally. Day 12. "You should smile more." Day 18. "HI loves optics." Day 23. "You're not as indispensable as you think." Day 27. "If you can't handle pressure." She could hear every recording in her head. She knew the timestamps. She knew the inflection in his voice when he crossed the line. And she knew something else now. He didn't think he ever crossed it. That was the dangerous part. He genuinely believed this was mentorship. He adjusted his watch. "I'm giving you 60 days to show improvement. Otherwise, we may need to reconsider your position here." There it was. The threat, softened with corporate language. Reconsider your position. Her throat didn't tighten this time. Instead, She noticed details. The faint stain of coffee on his desk pad. The slight twitch in his left eye when he delivered ultimatums. The way he always tapped his pen when he expected someone to panic. Tap, tap, tap. She stood up slowly. I understand, she said evenly. He blinked. That was it. No pleading, no tears, no defensive rambling. He straightened. Good. I'd hate to lose you. A lie wrapped in sugar. Maya gave a small nod. Then she walked to the door. Her hand touched the handle, and that's when he said it. The sentence that would later become File 31. You know, Maya, sometimes people just aren't built for leadership. It's not personal. She paused. Just long enough. Then she opened the door and walked out. Her heels clicked steadily across the office floor. But inside, something had snapped into place. Not emotionally, strategically, because she hadn't recorded this meeting. Not yet. She had decided something last night. 30 recordings were strong. 31 would be undeniable. She reached her desk, sat down, opened her laptop. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. The draft email was already there. Subject, formal complaint, hostile work environment. She had written it 3 days ago. Every paragraph carefully worded. Professional, factual, emotionless. Attached files already uploaded to cloud storage. 30 recordings. Time-stamped transcripts. Witness references. Cross-linked email evidence. But she hadn't sent it because she wanted one more thing. Proof that even after 30 days, he would still do it. Still belittle. Still undermine. Still threaten. And he had. Moments ago. Her phone buzzed. Another email. From Daniel. Subject, recap. She opened it. Per-hour discussion. We agreed you need significant improvement in executive presence. Let's circle back in 60 days. We agreed. Her lips curved slightly. He always rewrote history, but audio doesn't rewrite. Audio doesn't circle back. Audio doesn't soften tone. It captures truth. She picked up her phone, opened the voice memo app, hit record, and quietly documented what had just happened while it was fresh. Then she saved it. File 31. Her heartbeat remained steady. She attached it to the draft email. 31 files now. 31 days. 31 examples of intimidation disguised as leadership. Her cursor hovered over send. She could feel her pulse in her fingertips. This was the point of no return. If she sent it, everything would change. Maybe not immediately, but permanently. Her career, her reputation, her relationship with this company. But then she remembered something. Day 18. HR likes diversity optics. She remembered how small that sentence made her feel. How she went home that night and stared at herself in the mirror, wondering if she truly earned her position. She remembered crying silently so her neighbor wouldn't hear. She remembered questioning her own competence. And then she remembered something else. The data, the client emails praising her work, the revenue numbers tied directly to her accounts, the late nights, the weekends, the sacrifices. She wasn't replaceable. He just needed her to believe she was. Her index finger lowered. Click. Sent. The screen didn't explode. No alarms. No dramatic music. Just a tiny whoosh sound. Email sent. To HR. CC, Regional Director. Attachments. 31 audio files. Her stomach flipped. Not from fear. From release. Across the office, Daniel was still laughing with the senior managers. He hadn't checked his inbox yet. He didn't know that at 9:17 a.m., his career trajectory had quietly shifted. Maya leaned back in her chair. For the first time in months, she felt oxygen fill her lungs fully. But she also knew something. This wasn't the climax. This was ignition. And when Daniel finally opened that email, everything would change. At 9:42 a.m., Daniel stopped laughing. Maya noticed it before anyone else did. He had just taken a sip of coffee when his screen lit up again. New email. From Human resources. Subject, meeting request, urgent. His smile didn't disappear immediately. It froze, like someone had pressed pause on his face. He opened it. Maya watched from across the office, pretending to type. The blood drained from his cheeks slowly, not dramatically, just enough. His jaw tightened. He clicked again. Another email. Regional director sees it. Then another. Forwarded chain. Attachments. 31. His hand stopped moving. For a long moment, he didn't breathe. He closed his office door. Harder than usual. The entire floor felt the shift. People glanced at each other. Something was wrong. Inside his office, Daniel pressed play. File 1. His own voice filled the room. Clear. Unfiltered. You need thicker skin. He stopped it. Silence. Pressed play again. File 12. You should smile more in meetings. His breathing changed. He clicked File 18. HI loves diversity optics. He froze. That one lingered in the air like poison. There's something about hearing your own voice without control, without context, without spin. It doesn't lie. And Daniel Reeves was a man who lived on spin. He grabbed his phone. Dialed someone. No answer. He dialed again. Voicemail. He stood up. Paste. Pressed play again. File 27. If you can't handle pressure, maybe this isn't the place for you. He hit stop. Hard. Across the office, Maya kept typing. Her heart wasn't racing anymore. It was steady. Because she knew something he didn't. She had timed this perfectly. The regional director, Thomas Grant, was in town this week, which meant HR couldn't quietly bury it, which meant it wouldn't be handled internally, which meant it had visibility. At 10:03 a.m., Daniel's office door swung open. His face was composed again. Too composed. He walked directly toward her desk. Every step sharp. Controlled. But his eyes were different. Maya, he said evenly. Can we talk? Heads turned. The office air thickened. She looked up slowly. Of course. They walked back into his office. Door closed. He didn't sit. Neither did she. He leaned against his desk. I assume you sent that email. Straight to it. No pleasantries. Yes. Calm. Measured. He studied her face, searching for hesitation. Regret. Fear. He found none. You realize this is a serious accusation. I do. You could damage reputations. You did that yourself. The silence that followed was electric. For the first time in 3 years, he didn't interrupt her. He didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss. He stared, calculating. You recorded me, he said quietly. Yes. His nostrils flared slightly. That's unethical. She tilted her head. So is creating a hostile work environment. That hit. He straightened. You think HR is going to side with you? I think the recordings will speak for themselves. Another silence. Longer this time. He tried a different angle. His voice softened. Maya, you've misunderstood my mentorship style. Mentorship. There it was again. She almost smiled. I don't think anyone misunderstands audio files. His jaw clenched. The mask was slipping. You've made a mistake. No, she said gently. I corrected one. That's when it happened. For half a second. Fear flashed in his eyes. Not anger. Not superiority. Fear. Because he knew. The recordings weren't vague. They weren't emotional interpretations. They were evidence. Time-stamped. Patterned. Consistent. And HR didn't like patterns. Especially not ones involving discrimination implications. At 10:27 a.m., Daniel's phone rang. He glanced at the screen. HR. He didn't answer immediately. His pride battled his survival instinct. It rang again. He answered. Yes. Pause. I see. Longer pause. No, that's not necessary. His jaw tightened. I'll be there. He hung up slowly. They want to meet, he said flatly. With both of us. Maya nodded. Good. He stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Not the quiet employee, not the replaceable one, but someone who had been watching, documenting, waiting. "You planned this," he said. "Yes." No shame. No apology. He laughed once. Short. Dry. "You've been building a case. For 31 days. That number echoed between them. 31. He exhaled through his nose. "You think this ends well for you?" She stepped closer. Not aggressively, just enough to hold eye contact. "I think it ends truthfully." And that terrified him more than revenge ever could, because truth doesn't negotiate. Truth doesn't spin. Truth doesn't depend on hierarchy. At 11 a.m., they walked together toward the HR conference room, side by side. But no longer predator and prey. Now it was something else. Witness and defendant. The glass walls of the conference room reflected them both. Maya looked steady. Daniel looked polished. But inside, only one of them had control. And as the HR director opened the door and said, "Please, come in," Daniel realized something chilling. For 30 days, he thought he was shaping her career. In reality, she was shaping his ending. The conference room felt colder than the rest of the office. Not physically, strategically. HR rooms are always designed that way. Neutral walls, glass panels, no personality, no comfort, just space. The kind of space where reputations quietly unravel. Inside sat Linda Carver, head of human resources, early 50s, composed, immaculate posture, the type of woman who never raised her voice, but never needed to. Beside her sat Thomas Grant, regional director, Daniel's boss. That detail alone changed the oxygen in the room. Thomas didn't smile when they walked in. He didn't nod. He didn't even look at Daniel first. He looked at Maya. "Thank you for bringing this forward," he said calmly. Daniel's spine stiffened. That sentence wasn't neutral. That sentence meant something. They all Saturday. Maya placed her phone on the table. Not face down. Not hidden. Just there. Visible. Daniel noticed. Linda folded her hands. "We've reviewed the materials you sent this morning." Plural. Materials. Thomas leaned back slightly. All 31 recordings. Silence. Daniel shifted in his chair. "Before we proceed," Linda said gently, "Daniel, is there any context you'd like to provide?" Context. The word he had built his career on. He inhaled slowly. Leadership requires direct communication. Sometimes that can be misinterpreted. Misinterpreted. Maya didn't move. Linda clicked her laptop. File 18. The room filled with Daniel's recorded voice. "HR loves diversity optics." The words sounded heavier in that room. Slower. Ugly. Thomas didn't blink. Linda paused the audio. "Can you clarify what you meant here?" Daniel's mouth opened. Closed. Opened again. "It was a joke." Thomas leaned forward. "A joke about what?" Daniel swallowed. The silence became suffocating. Because jokes require laughter. There was none. Linda clicked file 12. "You should smile more in meetings." Pause. Linda looked at him. "Explain." He exhaled sharply. "I meant she should appear more approachable." Thomas's voice came colder now. "Would you say that to a male associate?" Daniel hesitated. That hesitation spoke louder than the recording. Maya felt it. The shift. The tilt. The invisible scale starting to lean. Linda played file 27. "If you can't handle pressure, maybe this isn't the place for you." Pause. Linda's tone remained steady. This appears to be a recurring pattern of undermining statements directed at the same employee. Daniel's composure began to crack. "You're taking everything out of proportion." Thomas spoke quietly. "The proportion is 31 separate files." That number hit again. 31. Maya kept her breathing even. But inside she felt something rising. Not anger. Not vindication. Clarity. Because for 3 years, she had questioned herself. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I misheard. Maybe I overreacted. But audio doesn't gaslight. Audio doesn't distort memory. It confirms it. Linda turned to Maya. Would you like to add anything? Maya nodded once. Yes. Her voice didn't shake. For 3 years, I believed I was underperforming. I questioned my competence. I doubted my growth. But when I began documenting interactions, I noticed a pattern. The feedback wasn't constructive. It was personal. She paused. Daniel didn't look at her. He stared at the table. I'm not here for revenge, she continued. I'm here because this environment is unsustainable. That sentence landed harder than any accusation, because it wasn't emotional. It was structural. Thomas interlocked his fingers. Daniel, he said evenly, have any other employees raised similar concerns? Daniel's silence answered first. Then, no. Linda glanced at her screen. That's not entirely accurate. Daniel's head snapped up. Linda continued. 2 informal complaints were logged last year. Both cited demeaning communication style. Neither escalated to formal review. The air shifted again. Daniel hadn't known that. Maya hadn't known that either. But now she did. She wasn't alone. Thomas exhaled slowly. This is a liability issue. Liability. That word changes everything. It removes ego. It removes emotion. It becomes risk. And companies don't protect ego. They protect risk. Daniel's confidence visibly deflated. This is blown out of proportion, he insisted weakly. Thomas looked at him steadily. What's blown out of proportion is that this was allowed to continue. That wasn't aimed at Maya. That wasn't even fully aimed at Daniel. That was aimed at the system. Linda closed her laptop gently. We will be conducting a formal investigation effective immediately. Daniel's pulse visibly quickened. What does that mean? Thomas answered. It means you'll be placed on administrative leave pending review. The words dropped like a hammer. Administrative leave. Daniel blinked. I beg your pardon. You'll hand over your access credentials today. The mask shattered. This is absurd. For the first time, his voice wasn't controlled. It was sharp, desperate. Maya watched carefully. Not with joy, with observation. This was the same tone he used when he cornered her in private. Only now, it was public. Linda's voice stayed calm. Lower your voice. He froze. The power dynamic had fully shifted, and he felt it, deeply. You're suspending me over hurt feelings, he snapped. Thomas's eyes hardened. We're suspending you over documented behavioral patterns. Silence. Daniel looked at Maya then. Really looked at her. Not as an employee. Not as subordinate. But as someone who had just altered his trajectory. You planned this, he muttered. Maya met his gaze steadily. I endured this. That was the difference. Planning implies manipulation. Enduring implies survival. And survival earns sympathy. Thomas stood. This meeting is over. Daniel didn't move. Security was called quietly, not dramatically, just procedure. Maya remained seated as Daniel was escorted out of the conference room. His shoulders were tense, his pride wounded, his authority dissolved. And for a brief moment, as he passed the glass walls, the entire office saw it, the untouchable manager, walking without power. When the doors closed behind him, the silence felt different, lighter. Thomas turned to Maya. You did the right thing. 3 years. That's how long she waited to hear something like that. She nodded once. Professional, composed, but inside, something finally released. Not celebration, not triumph, relief. Because the worst part of toxicity isn't the insult, it's the isolation. And now, she wasn't alone. But this wasn't over. Investigations don't end in one day. Reputations don't collapse in one meeting. And Daniel Reeves was not a man who went down quietly. He had influence, allies, history. And desperation makes powerful people dangerous. This was justice beginning, not justice finished. The office didn't return to normal. It pretended to. That was worse. By noon, whispers had already begun. Security escorting Daniel out hadn't gone unnoticed. In corporate environments, nothing ever does. People stared at their screens a little too intensely. Slack messages flew quietly between departments. Coffee breaks ran longer than usual. Maya stayed at her desk. She didn't smike, didn't celebrate, didn't engage. She knew better, because when someone powerful falls, the first instinct of everyone around them is self-preservation. And self-preservation makes people unpredictable. At 1:12 p.m., she received another email. From Linda Carver. Subject, confidential. Follow up. Her pulse steadied. Inside, it read, "We'll need you available this week for additional review sessions. Please refrain from discussing the matter with colleagues." Standard. Procedural. But below that, one line stood out. "Thank you for your professionalism." Professionalism. 3 years of being told she lacked leadership. Now professionalism. She exhaled slowly. Across the office, she could see small clusters forming. Elena avoided eye contact. Marcus kept glancing toward Daniel's now empty office. By 2:30 p.m., Daniel's name had disappeared from the internal directory. That happened fast. Faster than she expected. Which meant something else. This wasn't his first red flag internally. At 3:05 p.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. She let it ring. Then it rang again. And again. Voicemail notification. Her stomach tightened slightly. She opened it. Daniel's voice. Controlled at first. "Maya, this is unnecessary. We can resolve this privately." Pause. His tone sharpened. "You've misunderstood things. HR doesn't need to be involved." Another pause. "Lower now. Think carefully about your future here." The message ended. Her jaw tightened. There it was. The last attempt. Intimidation. Subtle threat. And ironically, another piece of evidence. She forwarded the voicemail to HR immediately. No commentary. Just forwarded. Because patterns matter. At 4:40 p.m., Thomas walked across the floor. Not something he normally did. He stopped at Maya's desk. The room quieted subtly. "Walk with me," he said calmly. They moved toward the small break lounge. Privacy without suspicion. He folded his arms lightly. "You understand this will be messy." "Yes. There may be resistance." "I expect that." He studied her face carefully. "You're prepared for retaliation." She didn't hesitate. "I already lived it." That answer landed. He nodded once. "Good." Then he added something that surprised her. "You're not the only one." She blinked. "What do you mean?" He lowered his voice slightly. "There are historical complaints that never escalated formally. Fear is powerful." The realization hit her. This wasn't just about her. She had cracked something open. And once cracks appear, pressure builds. The next morning, the office felt different again. Not whispering. Watching. At 9:20 a.m., an all-staff email arrived. From Corporate Communications. "Daniel Reeves is on temporary leave pending internal review." No details. No context. Just corporate neutrality. But neutrality is loud. By noon, Maya received 3 private messages. One from Elena. "I'm sorry." One from Marcus. "He did that to me too." And one anonymous message. "Thank you." Her throat tightened. Not from anger. From validation. Because isolation had been the worst part. Now the silence was breaking. But power rarely disappears quietly. At 3:17 p.m., she was called back into HR. Different room this time. Different tone. Linda looked more serious. "We've reviewed additional records." Maya sat upright. "There's evidence Daniel has deleted certain internal emails." Her stomach dropped slightly. But, Linda continued, "IT recovery has restored most of them." Deletion. That meant panic, which meant he knew the recordings were damaging. Thomas entered moments later. "We'll be interviewing additional staff tomorrow." The words felt bigger than just an investigation. They felt like exposure. Linda leaned forward slightly. "We need to ask you something delicate." Maya nodded. Do you believe Daniel's behavior was targeted specifically at you or systemic? The question lingered. Heavy. Maya thought carefully. It started subtle, but over time, I realized it wasn't personal bias alone. It was control. She paused. He needs people beneath him. Linda exchanged a look with Thomas. That answer aligned with what they were uncovering, because toxic leadership isn't random. It's patterned. It's strategic. And once documented, it collapses. That evening, as Maya packed her bag, she noticed Daniel's office door was now locked. Nameplate removed. Like he had never existed there. Corporate erasure. Quick. Efficient. Cold. But this still wasn't over. At 7:46 p.m., she received another voicemail. This one shorter. Angrier. You've made a mistake you can't undo. She didn't reply. She didn't block the number. She saved it. Because desperation escalates. And escalation exposes. 3 days later, the investigation findings began circulating quietly at executive level. HR had identified patterned demeaning communication, potential discrimination implications, abuse of authority, retaliatory language, 4 bullet points, each one heavy enough to sink a career. Maya wasn't in that executive room, but she felt the shift, because by Friday morning, Daniel's LinkedIn profile no longer listed the company, and by Friday afternoon, she was called into Thomas's office. Alone. He didn't waste time. The review board has concluded. Her pulse remains steady. Daniel's employment has been terminated. No drama. No ceremony. Just finality. Terminated. 3 years. Ended in 1 week. She didn't smile. She didn't celebrate. She simply nodded. But Thomas wasn't finished. There's something else. He slid a folder across the desk. Promotion recommendation. Effective immediately. Her breath caught slightly. This is based on performance metrics, he said firmly, not sympathy. The weight of that sentence mattered, because this wasn't revenge through destruction. It was justice through recognition. She opened the folder slowly. Senior strategy lead. Her name printed clearly. Not replaceable. Not lacking leadership. Not optics. Qualified. Proven. Documented. Thomas watched her carefully. You changed more than your situation. She looked up. What do you mean? There are 5 additional internal reports now. People felt safe after you spoke. That hit deeper than the promotion, because power protects itself until someone challenges it. And when one person stands up, others follow. As she left his office, she walked past the empty space where Daniel once sat today. No nameplate. No navy suit. No patronizing smile. Just silence. And in that silence, balance. But here's the truth. Revenge isn't about destruction. It's about correction. And Daniel's greatest mistake wasn't underestimating her intelligence. It was underestimating her patience. Because sometimes, the quietest person in the room is the one collecting evidence. The promotion didn't feel real at first. It felt quiet, like a secret she was afraid to say out loud. Monday morning, her access badge unlocked a different office. Not Daniel's. They didn't give her that one. That office was being reproposed. Instead, she was moved to a corner workspace with actual sunlight. The blinds were open, fully open. The warmth across her desk felt symbolic. For 3 years she worked in half-light. Now there were no shadows. But elevation comes with scrutiny, and scrutiny comes with tension. At 9:15 a.m., she stepped into her first team meeting as senior strategy lead. 10 faces looked back at her, some supportive, some nervous, some calculating, because power had shifted, and whenever power shifts, alliances get re-evaluated. Elena sat near the front. Marcus avoided eye contact at first. 2 newer associates watched carefully, like students analyzing a case study in real time. Maya didn't stand at the head of the table. She remained seated, level with them. I know the past week has been disruptive, she began calmly. We're going to focus on performance, clarity, and respect. Simple. Direct. No dramatic speeches. No subtle jabs. No mention of Daniel. Because leadership isn't about humiliation. It's about stability. But even as she spoke, her phone buzzed silently inside her bag. Unknown number. Again. She ignored it. She finished the meeting with clarity. Action points. Defined roles. No sarcasm. No intimidation. Just structure. Afterward, Elena approached her quietly. I should have said something sooner. Maya studied her face. You weren't ready. Elena swallowed. He made me feel stupid. Maya nodded slightly. That's how control works. There it was again. Control. Not feedback. Not mentorship. Control. By lunchtime, Maya had already noticed something subtle. Productivity felt different. Not forced. Not fear-driven. Focused. The energy of a team shifts when fear leaves the room. But at 2:02 p.m., the past knocked again. This time, it wasn't a voicemail. It was an email from a personal address. Daniel Reeves. Subject, final conversation. Her stomach tightened slightly. She opened it. You think you've won. But reputations are fragile. Be careful who you cross. Short. Cold. Threatening without specifics. Classic Daniel. She didn't feel fear. She felt documentation. Forwarded to HR. Again. No commentary. Pattern matters. 31 recordings started this. She wasn't about to stop recording patterns now. At 3:30 p.m., HR called her in once more. Linda looked tired. We've received additional communications from Daniel. Maya nodded. I forwarded the email. Linda sighed. He's contesting the termination. Of course he was. People who lose power rarely accept it. He's alleging entrapment. Maya almost laughed. Entrapment. As if recording repeated misconduct was manipulation. Thomas entered the room moments later. His consulting legal. There it was. Escalation. This wasn't just professional humiliation now. It was ego damage. And ego damage fuels retaliation. Do I need legal representation? Maya asked calmly. Thomas shook his head. The recordings were made in compliance with state consent laws. You're protected. Protected. That word meant something. Because for 3 years, she wasn't. Linda leaned forward. We may need you to testify internally if this proceeds formally. I will. No hesitation. Because when you've already endured the worst part, truth doesn't scare you anymore. But that night, for the first time since sending the email, she felt something different. Not fear. Not doubt. Exposure. Because stepping into light means being seen. And being seen means being judged. She lay awake replaying everything. What if people think I manipulated this? What if they believe his version? What if I'm labeled difficult? That's the hidden cost of speaking up. Even when you're right. You worry. But then she remembered something. File 18. HR loves diversity optics. That wasn't interpretation. That wasn't tone confusion. That was clear. Documented. Unfiltered. Truth doesn't depend on popularity. It depends on evidence. The next morning, something unexpected happened. An email arrived from corporate ethics. Subject, policy review update. The company was implementing mandatory leadership conduct training, anonymous reporting enhancements, recorded performance review transparency. 3 bullet points. Structural change. Not symbolic. Structural. Maya stared at the screen. This wasn't just about Daniel anymore. It was about culture. And culture shifts slowly, until someone forces it. At 11:45 a.m., Marcus knocked lightly on her new office door. I need to tell you something. She motioned him in. He closed the door quietly. He made me cry once. The words came out fast. After a client presentation. Said I sounded incompetent. Maya felt anger flicker, but she kept her voice steady. Why didn't you report it? Marcus looked embarrassed. He told me he'd ruin my performance review. There it was again. Control. Maya leaned back slightly. He can't do that anymore. Marcus exhaled slowly. You really did it. Not accusatory. Amazed. She shook her head gently. No, I documented it. That's the difference. Documentation removes debate. Documentation removes manipulation. Documentation forces accountability. But the story still wasn't over. At 4:10 p.m., Thomas called her again. Legal has reviewed the case. Her pulse steadied, and his withdrawing the contest. That was fast, which meant one thing. His legal counsel had listened to the recordings, all 31, and told him the truth. You can't win against your own voice. Thomas continued. There will be no further action from his side. Silence settled in. Not dramatic, not explosive, just final. Finality feels different than victory. Victory is loud. Finality is quiet. Maya walked back to her office slowly, closed the door, sat in her chair. Sunlight warmed her desk. 3 years of tension. 31 days of patience. One email. And everything changed. But here's the part no one talks about. Revenge isn't about watching someone fall. It's about reclaiming the space they made you doubt you deserved. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt grounded, balanced, validated, and stronger, because Daniel didn't lose his job because she destroyed him. He lost it because she stopped protecting him. And sometimes, the most powerful move you can make is simply pressing record. 6 months later, the office no longer whispered. It worked. That was the first noticeable difference. Not louder, not flashier, just healthier. Deadlines were still tight. Clients were still demanding. Corporate pressure didn't disappear. But the tension that once lived in the air, the kind that made people second-guess their own voice, was gone. Maya felt it most during meetings. People spoke without flinching. They disagreed without shrinking. They presented without rehearsing defensive apologies in advance. That's what fear does when it leaves a room. It takes the weight with it. But justice has layers. The immediate outcome had been clear. Daniel terminated. Promotion granted. Policy changes implemented. The long-term outcome, that was quieter and deeper. One afternoon, Maya stayed late, not because she had to, but because she wanted to refine a proposal. The sunlight outside faded slowly, turning the windows into mirrors. She caught her reflection, and for a moment, she saw the version of herself from 3 years ago. Tighter posture, smaller presence, eyes constantly scanning for approval. She almost didn't recognize her now. Confidence isn't loud. It's not arrogance. It's not dominance. It's steadiness. And she felt steady. Her phone buzzed softly on the desk. A LinkedIn notification. She almost ignored it. But curiosity won. Daniel Reeves has started a new position. She stared at the screen. There it was. He hadn't disappeared. People like Daniel rarely do. He'd rebranded. New company. New title. New description filled with polished corporate language about mentorship and strategic leadership. Her chest tightened for half a second. Not with fear. With awareness. Toxic leaders don't vanish. They relocate. For a brief moment, doubt tried to creep in. What if he does it again somewhere else? What if nothing truly changed? But then she remembered something powerful. He lost something he valued more than image. He lost control. And once control cracks publicly, it never fully restores. Reputations in executive circles travel quietly. The industry talks. References get checked. Patterns follow. He might rebuild, but he would never be untouchable again. That mattered. A week later, she received a message from someone she didn't know. A woman named Priya. Hi Maya. I used to work under Daniel 2 years ago. I heard what happened. Thank you. Maya read the message 3 times. 2 years ago. Before she even started recording. Before she realized she wasn't alone. They spoke on a call later that evening. Priya's voice trembled slightly at first. He told me I was too sensitive. That I'd never survive corporate leadership. The script was identical. Almost word for word. Maya closed her eyes briefly. Patterns. Always patterns. You weren't the problem, Maya said quietly. There was a long silence on the other end, then a soft breath. I know that now. That sentence hit deeper than any promotion ever could, because revenge satisfies ego, but validation heals identity. Months passed. Performance metrics improved across the department. Turnover dropped. HR reported a measurable increase in internal feedback submissions, not complaints, but suggestions. People felt safe enough to speak. That's the invisible metric no spreadsheet shows. One afternoon, Thomas stopped by her office again. Less formal now, more conversational. You know, he said, leaning casually against the doorframe, I underestimated you. She raised an eyebrow slightly. In what way? I thought you were resilient. I didn't realize you were strategic. That made her smile faintly. Resilience without strategy is just endurance. He nodded slowly. And strategy without patience fails. They held eye contact for a moment. Professional respect. Earned. But there was still something she hadn't fully processed. Anger. Not at Daniel. At herself. For staying silent for 3 years. One evening, she drove home and parked outside her apartment. She didn't get out right away. She sat there in the dim light, hands resting on the steering wheel. Why didn't I act sooner? The question had haunted her quietly. But then the answer surfaced. Because she needed proof. Not for them. For herself. Gaslighting is powerful. It makes you question your own memory, your own interpretation, your own worth. Recording those 31 days wasn't just about exposing him. It was about confirming her reality. That realization softened something inside her. She hadn't been weak. She had been cautious. And caution kept her precise. A few weeks later, HR invited her to speak at a leadership development session. Not to retell the drama, but to discuss accountability culture. She stood at the front of the room. New managers watching. Listening. She didn't mention Daniel by name. She didn't dramatize. She simply said, leadership isn't about authority. It's about responsibility. If people feel smaller after interacting with you, that's not strength. That's insecurity. The room was silent, reflective. That was the real payoff. Not his termination, not her promotion, but influence. Because now she shaped culture. Instead of surviving it, that night, she returned home and opened her laptop. Not to review files, not to check emails, but to delete something. The folder labeled Q4 reports. 31 recordings. She stayed at it. Each file a memory. Each memory once painful. Now, evidence of growth. She clicked delete. Not because she needed to forget, but because she didn't need protection anymore. The power dynamic had shifted permanently, and she had moved beyond survival mode. Before shutting her laptop, she paused. Then she opened a blank document. She titled it, Day 1. Not of recording, of rebuilding, because revenge stories often end at the downfall, but real transformation begins after. Daniel underestimated her silence. He mistook patience for weakness. He mistook professionalism for passivity. And in doing so, he built his own exit. The 31st day changed everything. Not because she exposed him, but because she chose herself. And sometimes, the most satisfying revenge isn't watching someone fall. It's realizing you were never beneath them to begin with, and